Okay, so I could ask you, what's your goal in teaching your subject matter to your students? And I can ask it in a different way. Many teachers feel an obligation or a very strong urge to cover the content in the course, right? And many times we feel a conflict between a need to cover the content and a desire to teach our students to think critically, okay? And here's a question I often ask. Have you ever been behind in teaching the content of your course or your class and find yourself talking faster? And if you've been in that position at all, you can see something bizarre is going on here. Because if covering the content means anything, it means getting students to grasp the content, to understand the content. It does not mean that I've said it, right? But having said it in class, even if I'm talking fast, kind of for us teachers, gets us off the hook. I can say, well, I covered it in class. If they didn't get it, I at least covered it, meaning I said it. But what we really want is for students to understand the content, to grasp it. And that's it's actually difficult to describe well because oftentimes just memorizing things or a variety of memorizing looks like it's understanding. Okay, so on a basic level, how can I help my students learn to understand the most important concepts in my course or the most important parts of my course? And I'm going to say, I need to have them process it. Um, so I'm guessing that you already have your students process things in your class, but I want to say something that's too much of a generalization, but if you already have your students process what you do in your class, you don't do it enough. They need to process a lot over and over again. I think that one of the great impediments to students learning the content of a course, learning the subject matter, is our own expertise, the teacher's own expertise. When you know your subject matter really well, it's extremely difficult to put yourself into the position of someone who does not know the subject matter well or does not know the subject matter much at all. So what I sense about myself and about other teachers is that we often go in and we kind of take for granted a certain level of experience. Like, what can I tell you? So I sometimes would teach ethics and we would go over utilitarianism. Notice it's an unfamiliar word to students. Utilitarianism. You're going to seek the greatest happiness for the greatest number. And I'd explain utilitarianism to them and I'd have them process it in a way that I'm going to show you in a moment. And but then I would do this curious thing. A week would go by and I would say, okay, so if we take a utilitarian approach to this problem, we'll find such and such. And if we take a rights theory approach to this, we'll do such and such. Notice I'm talking very fast and I'm using the word utilitarianism and I'm using it as if you, my students, understand it. Not only am I using it as if you understand it, but I'm using it as if you have it at the tip of your tongue and you know exactly what it is I'm talking about. And that's an illusion. I think it's an illusion to think that students will have that. It would be an illusion if you told me a key term in your field that was unfamiliar to me, and then 2 weeks later started talking about it casually. The expectation that I would understand it, it would be unrealistic. So I'm not talking about just about students. I'm talking about people. So we use our terms, we use our concepts, and after explaining them, or sometimes even after explaining and having students process them, we assume, we take it for granted that they understand it, um, or that they understand it to as strong a degree as to let them understand the rest of what goes on in the course or the class. Okay, so here's my very abbreviated simplistic way of teaching of teaching teaching for critical thinking, but really of teaching. It's this. It's got 3 steps. First, you do something. right? You teach them about utilitarianism. You teach them about engineering. You teach them about this or that, about biology. You do something about the cell. You do something. Second, they process it. You have them process it. And third, you give feedback on how well they've processed it. So you do something, they process it, you have them process it. And third, you give feedback. Of those three, I would say the least important is number one. The least important is you doing something. What's important is that they process it, and essential is that you give feedback. It doesn't have to be one-on-one feedback. It can be, I can say, okay, so what was the main point in the essay you read yesterday? You read for class today. And you're my students. I'm going to have you write the answer, write down the main point of the essay in just 2 minutes. Um, and so I wait my 2 minutes, and then I say, okay, well, here's what I'd say the main point of that essay was. Compare your answer to mine. If yours is the same as mine, then you got it. If yours is different from mine, there are two possibilities. One is that there's more than one main point, and the other possibility is you're wrong. The chances of my being wrong about the main point of this essay is extremely small, right? I'm a professional in this area. I've read this essay a dozen times. I've taught it before. So nothing wrong with being wrong, but that's something to learn from. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. So I asked them to process the main point of an essay, and then I gave feedback. I can also sometimes give individual feedback. I have my students process again and again, all kinds of different ways. Uh, the reading you did last night, how does it, in 2 minutes, how does it relate to what we did in class last time? To what we addressed in class last time? Because my students don't automatically connect the reading to what we did in class last time. Or I might say, the reading you did last night, how does it connect to the following topic that we covered 3 weeks ago? My students do not make that kind of connection. They kind of tend to think that each class is independent of the one before. Being a student doesn't mean that you're putting things together so much. My experience of teachers is that there's a lot of critical thinking that gets done in the classroom, but it's almost entirely done by the teacher. You assemble your classes, you organize things, you give examples. And what my suggestion is that there's nothing wrong with that, but that you have students do that at least as much as you do, and maybe more than you do, that you have them uh, process it. So notice I keep saying I have my students do it in 2 minutes because I'm not going to be giving class time for this, only a small amount of class time for them to be processing, but this allows me to have them do it again and again. So if we covered utilitarianism 2 classes ago, I will say, okay, so I want you to state what utilitarianism is. The greatest good for the greatest number is the key phrase. But that's nothing. That's just words, right? And I'm going to want you to explain it in a paragraph. A quick paragraph, just 4 minutes, because utilitarianism is a centerpiece of this course. And I might ask them to do it again. So let me share with you about these are ways of processing.